We're here in Hadley, Massachusetts at one of our fields. We're about to start our 13th year of growing, producing, harvesting a very wide variety of organic mixed vegetables that we sell for CSA and direct-to-market wholesale. So we do a lot of business with River Valley Market and a few other grocery stores and small local distributors. I went to UMass. I was involved in a lot of different kinds of activism. I took an apprenticeship at the food bank farm and I really loved it. I found, like, for the first time in my life, work that I really believed in, that I felt like I could maybe make a living doing. Prior to that, it had always been sort of like stuff that I love, that was like my art and my political activism or work to make a living. Just for the first time in my life, I found work that I love doing, and I liked being outside every day. I liked working with plants. I liked giving food to people, providing food to our community, and I kept at it. I worked at a few different farms managing, and an opportunity came up about 13 years ago. My partner at the time and I were trying to start a farm, and we'd been looking kind of all over the place. And then my mentor, Michael Doctor, had been running the food bank farm, and we sort of put our heads together and figured out that we could start a farm right down the road, which is how we got the name The Next Barn Over. It's the next barn over from the food bank farm. So a whole bunch of CSA members came over to us from the food bank farm. Many of them have been with us for the last 13 years, and a bunch more have joined us since. You know, I think we always thought we would just focus on CSA the way that the food bank farm had, but we found rather quickly in that first year that we weren't able to sell quite all of the produce that we were growing. So I reached out to the original River Valley Co-op there in Northampton, to the produce manager. He was like, oh yeah, you know, send us some of this and some of that and some of the other thing. And next thing you knew, we were doing twice a week deliveries. River Valley Co-op always purchased all across our menu, which worked really well with our mix of doing direct-to-market wholesale and also doing the CSA. And we've been doing more and more of that ever since. It's a little nuts to grow 40 to 50 different crops. We got into it because I did my apprenticeship at a CSA farm. I really got into farming because I was interested in CSA, community-supported agriculture. And I saw the ways that farmers could be supported at the beginning of the season when they needed it most. Doing a CSA means that you need to grow everything. So we do. We grow everything from arugula and tatsoi and bok choy and all these little baby greens to like 3 acres of sweet potatoes and 3 acres of garlic. We've got garlic back here. Garlic's one of our prized crops that we grow. We've been saving this seed for over 30 years. We've still been growing it. So we have some specialty crops kind of mixed in there, but then we just grow everything else and, you know, and everything in between. So not just carrots, but orange carrots, purple carrots, and, you know, not just green beans, but green beans and purple beans and yellow beans. But it's a lot to manage. You know, you can't buy sort of the specialized equipment. You have to use equipment that you can use in a diversity of ways. So there are aspects of it that are really challenging, moving between lots of different crops. But there's also wonderful things, which is why we do it. So when we have a bad tomato year, we still have awesome eggplant or awesome sweet potatoes or wonderful peppers. Unlike in sort of the more traditional and conventional system of agriculture where folks just grow a handful of crops, when you have one single bad crop in one year, that can really devastate a farm. We're insulated a little bit more through growing such a wide variety. We're always really eager for those first beets to come out of the ground and the first like squash and zucchini as well. And then it just grows and grows from there. I mean, cucumbers, the first of the peppers, first of the eggplant. We should be getting tomatoes around the same time. We've got some tomatoes in a high tunnel this year, so those will start coming in a little bit earlier than we're used to. And then the fall crops are more root heavy and cole crop heavy, things like cabbages and broccoli and cauliflower. But we just build and build and build. We grow as much as possible of the most popular crops, the lettuces and peppers and cucumbers, tomatoes, and then a little smattering of the other things. So we're certified organic. I've always been an organic farmer. I got my training in organic farming. I really believe in organic and sustainable farming. The big differences are, you know, the sources of our fertilizer. We don't have the same kind of chemical controls when it comes to weed and pest and disease management. So we use a lot of cultural controls. We rely really heavily on a crop rotation, keeping the same crop family out of a singular field for at least 3 or 4 years at a time to rotate out any typical pests and disease pressures that might arise. We also rely really heavily on using cover crops. We're standing right now in front of a field of rye. Like a lot of other farmers around here, we use a lot of winter rye, oats and peas and clover, Sudan grass, all kinds of stuff to sort of build nutrients naturally back into the soil to keep the soil really healthy. So all of that's just part of how we farm. We rely pretty heavily too on mechanical cultivation. So we use tractors to cultivate. We don't use, chemicals to kill weeds. So we're really like in the bottom of an ancient lake. We're talking about just feet and feet and feet under our feet of very gorgeous, loamy soil, no rocks, beautiful, fertile, like the best stuff, and no rocks. Very unusual to find rocks here. we kind of, when we find one, we're like, I found a rock. So beautiful, loamy, fertile, gorgeous soil. It takes a lot of hard work to farm, but to farm here in Hadley, it's like a lot of the work is being done by the soil. So you see the mountains, they're hills now, but they're ancient mountains. Those were sort of the edges of this bowl that we're in. When I was first getting into farming and trying to start my own farm and not being able to find land, I did look around, but I did want to stay here. And part of the reason I wanted to stay here is because of the community around here. But part of the reason I really wanted to stay here is to get to continue to steward this soil and continue to build this soil. And it's a treat to farm. There's a really incredible program in the state of Massachusetts, the Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program, which protects farmland like this from development in perpetuity, so forever and ever. There's more land protected here in Hadley than there is in any other town in the state of Massachusetts. The last I checked, it was like over 2,500 acres of protected land can only be used for farming right here in Hadley and across the state. It's an essential program, I would say. In a town like Hadley, we have this really world-class resource that we're standing on top of. There's no limiting material. Thankfully, there's been largely a moratorium on development off of the Route 9 corridor. So if you've only ever drive down the Route 9 corridor, then all you see is big box stores, then you may not realize that the rest of Hadley hasn't changed a whole lot in the last 50 years. There's still a ton of farming happening here. We didn't go through the same kind of, agricultural depression that a lot of other parts of the country went through in the 70s and 80s because we have this incredible resource of soil, because we have this incredibly supportive community around here that does buy local and really values buying locally. And now we've got awesome stores like River Valley Co-op too. So yeah, all of that support and the soil is huge. Working with you guys at River Valley Co-op, it's meaningful because if we didn't have those kinds of relationships and partnerships, then we wouldn't be able to provide good jobs for our staff and we wouldn't be able to cover crop the land. We wouldn't be able to continue to do this work that is so essential. We also have relationships with other organizations in the community. We work with Gardening the Community down in Springfield. We've been working with them from very early on when we started the farm. And that was always a really important part of the work for us. Part of our mission was not just to grow food in a way that was good for the land, but also to grow food in a way that was good for people. We try to grow, nutritious, sustainable, and affordable food. So working with organizations like Gardening the Community, organizations like the Amherst and Northampton Survival Center, the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. So we love working with organizations to try to make, any of our surplus food available. We work with a couple organizations that do gleaning, that come out to the fields when we're done with a field, and that food will end up at soup kitchens, food pantries, that sort of thing. High tunnels are just another word for a greenhouse. Generally, the one difference I'd say between a high tunnel and a greenhouse, at least the way we use this language on our farm, our greenhouse has heat in it and we use it as a propagation house. We grow all of our seedlings in there in the spring. The high tunnel, in other words, we don't do any growing in the ground of our greenhouse. In the high tunnel, we're growing in the ground crops that could otherwise be grown in the field, but they really appreciate this controlled environment. So instead of getting rained on whenever it decides to rain and as much as it decides to rain, then we can actually dial in how much water the plants are receiving. That also helps with disease management and a warmer environment early on in the spring when it's still cold out. So we got these peppers in here a couple weeks earlier than we put our field peppers out. With the tomatoes, same thing. We were able to get them in earlier and we can just shut down the plastic and it stays relatively toasty in here through the night, even on a cold night. Also in the fall, allows you to extend that season a little bit longer. We've seen a lot of like winter greens production increase in the winter time around here, and that's important in New England where we don't have a huge crop selection on those margins of the growing season, or certainly haven't historically had things like salad greens in the winter time. We haven't had a way to do that, but these structures are allowing farmers to do that, and we're really excited. Mostly we're going to be doing things like nightshades, tomatoes, peppers. We've got a little bit of cucumbers. We'll see. If we're able to get more funding to put more high tunnels up, we might experiment with some other crops as well. I'm just really eager and excited to have these peppers in this controlled environment where we are getting to give it the moisture that it wants and give it the nutrients that it wants and keep the leaves nice and dry. I think we're going to have a fantastic harvest out of these. These are red and orange Corno di Toro peppers. They're those long Italian sweet peppers. They're fantastic. I mean, really incredible. So it's all, it's like half the house is reds and the other half of the house is orange of the Corno di Toros. So I think we're going to have a really rockin' harvest of these this year. A big goal of ours is to continue to put more and more land into cover crop every year, and we have been doing that for the last 13 years. So total we crop about 50 acres, but we're keeping about 15 of those 50 acres in a fallow cover crop rotation every year. And we'd like to keep building our land base so that we can continue to cover crop more of that land to continue to build the soil back and build the organic matter back in the soil. Similarly with our staff, we're really working towards creating more sustainable jobs that folks can really feel good about coming back to every year, where they earn a little bit more money or they earn other benefits, really feel like part of the team of ownership and a connection to the work that they're doing. Improving our equipment, improving our systems. We're standing right now in front of a couple of high tunnels. I get really excited about putting more crops in high tunnels. Just be able to have a little bit more of a controlled environment, especially as we're seeing the weather changing with climate change. So things like high tunnels and building the soil as best we can are going to be really important factors in that, and probably investing in some equipment to help us care for the soil better. We started this farm out on a shoestring, like many probably first-generation farmers do. I didn't inherit any of this. We really started out on the good faith of like 300 share members who came to us from the food bank farm and pledged their support. And that was enough money to sort of support our annual budget and to buy one single tractor and one piece of equipment. And over 13 years, we've been able to build high tunnels and build a greenhouse and purchase 10 acres of land. The other 40 acres of land we still rent. We hope to buy more land because we feel like to really care for the land properly, it would be best under our ownership. I'm really grateful to be in year 13. My hope is it just keeps getting a little bit easier, and we keep getting better and better at what we do. But the first number of years were just like sun up to sundown, literally multitasking the entire time. And that's the aspect of, sustainable farming that's not maybe totally sustainable. I don't know if I would say that was totally a surprise, but I think to the extent that I had to really shift at some point. And fortunately, by year 4, when that was starting to become more and more clear, we had a little bit more experience under our belt. And, we had folks who were working with us that had some real skill and experience, and that was huge. That's probably the biggest learning curve for most first-generation farmers, I would imagine. It's like that balance. And I think we all reckon with that here in 2022. We can all spend too much time working and too much time in front of the computer and not enough time with our family and not enough time doing the things that we love. So it's the same challenge that everyone else has, and certainly that anybody else that owns their own business has. Consistently from year to year, I love sweet potatoes. I love growing sweet potatoes. We've been growing like a little bit more and more sweet potatoes every year. We're standing in front of the field we just recently plowed and prepared. We're going to be planting our sweet potatoes next week. Yeah, there's so many things I get excited about, and I don't always keep on growing them. They're not necessarily like the thing that works for our market, but artichokes one year or 2 years, or fava beans one year. But our big crops, I'd say, that I get excited about every year: sweet potatoes, garlic. Everybody loves like the first greens of the season, obviously. The first baby carrots of the season, first cucumbers of the season. I don't know how you choose. I get excited about all of it.